You are listening to the Messiah Hour with Ari Louis.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports News Radio. Thank you for joining us. At any time, you can email the program at messiahhour@gmail.com, or you can email the station Israel Sports News Radio at gmail.com. Rabbi Yosef Mizrachi has caused quite a bit of controversy by making comments that only 1 million Jews died during the Holocaust. He has since retracted those comments and apologized. Many people, however, are not happy with the apology. On to discuss this and other matters is our favorite rabbi from Spot. He's a co-author of the book The World of The Ger, Rabbi David Katz. Rabbi Katz, how you doing out there?
Hey, Ari, thanks for having me back as always. It's a pleasure.
Yes, indeed. So let's first talk about the matter of what Rabbi Mizrachi said, the complaints made against him, and his apology, if there's a correlation, because it sounds like that what people are complaining about and what he said are kind of two different things. His apology is a little bit different as well, so tell us about that.
All right, so Ari, let's try to set down some ground rules for the listeners for now and in the unforeseeable future, okay?
Okay, sir.
Because there's a lot of problems, and I want to solve the issues right now and here with you, okay? Number one, if you had, and I might have some quick give and take with you, Ari, so stay on your feet.
Sure.
If you have seen a video of Rabbi Mizrachi in a derogatory fashion, at home, raise your hand. Ari, does that include you? Are you raising your hand?
Have I seen it? Yes. I'll raise my hand.
Okay. And are you aware of who's putting out these videos?
That I am not.
All right, there's a horrible group of people on the internet. And they go by an alias of Dana Cohen. It's not even a girl. It's a hate group. I don't know where they're based out of. It's a known thing on Facebook. And their goal is to promote Lashon Hara, Moti Shemra on Rabbi Mizrachi. Now, we all know that rabbis can be controversial figures, whether you love Rabbi Mizrachi or or whatever your feelings are. That's fine. You can have your opinion, but that's not what this is about. These people have taken the fight beyond fighting. It's purely hate. It's Lashon Hara, and that's an understatement. And what they have done is they're taking his videos, which often take longer than an hour and a half in length. They're very long videos, up to 2 hours at times. And they're looking for provocative things, almost like if you were to take a video of a person. You know how when you capture a video of somebody, that you can get that one awkward frame that totally can embarrass somebody, correct? Right?
Yeah, kind of like they take a few seconds, like when a politician speaks, they'll take 3-4 seconds to get a soundbite.
Exactly. So they're doing that with Rabbi Mizrachi, and then they're calling it, Rabbi Mizrachi says, and it's something 100% out of context. So number one, the Lashon Hara going around primarily is because the information, the data in its raw form that you receive it in is perverted already. That's number one. When we share the videos, I myself included, about the million of the Holocaust, that is being spread by this group. Now, why is that such a problem? It's a problem because they're taking it out of context. And therefore, whatever complaint you may or may not have, they are framing it in a way that your complaint is now contrived and not correct. For example, one of the videos about can men and women dance together at a frum wedding. The main part of the video was that the wedding was a wedding of scoffers. So if you're dancing, you're basically supporting scoffing, intermarriages, and as a rebellion. Okay? That's much different than just saying a radical chumrah. Even if he holds with a radical chumrah, you can't just take it out of context. All Torah has to be in context. Otherwise, it's not Torah. And that's like, that we see on the internet, people take Talmudic quotes and say, look, this is what the Jews say they can do. It's wrong. Number two, since that all of our attacks came from this kind of distortion, his apology then was towards those attacks as they framed them. The problem is the original video actually was not having anything to do with the Holocaust per se. It was about Zionism. So the problem first that erupts is the attacks were not authentic, and therefore the apology was based on their attack, but the apology then did not address what the actual content was in the real video.
All right, Rabbi Katz, a big issue which was brought up by Rabbi Mizrachi, and it's an issue that is talked about a lot, are conversions from people who were born in the former Soviet Union. And that is a big deal. Rabbi Riskin brought that up as well. So tell us a bit how that correlates and ties into everything.
Okay, in Rabbi Mizrachi's video, he's talking about secularism, intermarriage, and assimilation, and he's showing different quadrants of Jewish history and geography in order to make this point clear that there's a silent Holocaust going on. Now, I first heard about the silent Holocaust from Universal Torah back in 2000. This is not a new idea. It's not a Rabbi Mizrachi idea. This is a known thing in Kiruv Judaism, and this is the main thrust of Kiruv Judaism today. So if you're attacking on that point, you're off skew. Number two, the points he uses are, in America, there's X amount of millions of Jews and X percentages that are actually not Jewish. You go to a Reform shul, most of them could be not Jewish. Okay, when I was doing tshuva and I went to a Reform shul, I was going to a shtibel, Orthodox. I wasn't sure if I was going to become from. I was brand new. And one day I said, you know what? I'm not sure about the shtibel. I want to go check out this temple Emmanuel. It was Saturday morning, Shabbos morning. I got my suit on, and I went in. They have no yarmulke. They're playing guitar, kumbaya. Okay? I walked right out, went to the shtibel, and never looked back. That's who he's talking about. Now, at the same time, in Europe, there was a certain amount of intermarriage and assimilation. I don't care which country, or town, or village, or era. Okay? It's just a historical fact at some point and in some place. Not essential to the talk. And in Israel, we have a problem with assimilation and intermarriage. How so? In Zionism, the country wants to rescue lost Jews. Call it the Ethiopians, call it the Bnei Menashe, and call it the Russians. The fact is, and whether or not the Ethiopians, they say some are really lost Jews, some aren't, we know not all of them were. As for the Bnei Menashe, again, I don't know the statistics. It's not my point in this discussion. Some are not Jews. So what do? Giur l'chumra. They convert them out of necessity. But the Russians is a different issue. They made Aliyah based on like one grandparent, very similar to what the party line is, what the Nazis saying you're Jewish by a quarter Jewish. All these things. Rabbi Riskin in his letters that he wrote states that we should go ahead and just convert them and then deal with the consequences of their tshuva later. Rabbi Cardoza says the same thing. In my opinion, as a ger rabbi, ger non-Jew, that's my field of interest, these are gerim. Classic case of ger. Somebody connected or attached to the Jewish people and for whatever reason is not a full Jew, does not want to be a full Jew, would only want to be a full Jew for things like marriage and social privileges or whatever. The Torah is equipped to deal with this case of Israel. Cohen, Levi, Israel, ger. For dafka for marriages, that's what the fourth house of Israel is about. What do you do if you have a mamzer? What do you do if you have all these weird cases? The ger is there because the ger is allowed to intermingle in certain areas. The redemption is largely built on the reattachment of the ger in the right way. What Rabbi Mizrachi is saying is, it's a problem to intermarry with the Russians in the current state of Israel and the current mode of Zionism will run into the same problem that it had in Europe, of which it's riding the coattails of, as is America. Forget America, if that's a different issue of assimilation. In Israel, we're talking about Russian non-Jews posing as Jews, all this issue. The answer is ger. We don't need to convert them and make insincere converts. And to call them stam goyim is also wrong. This is a classic case of ger. And that is a Torah solution to an exile problem. But to go ahead and label it as, of course they're Jews. They carry, one sign from the tribe, whatever it is. If your mother's not Jewish, you're not a Jew. That is why the Torah has ger. If you're looking to come back into Israel today and your mother was not Jewish, you can either convert if you feel you're a Jew, but then they'll say, oh, I can't, this and that. Well, guess what? That means you are a ger. Period.
All right, again, this is the Messiah Hour at Israel Sports News Radio. My guest is Rabbi David Katz. little bit fallback still from Rabbi Mizrachi's apology. We're talking about that. Let's talk about the concept of taking advantage of ignorance. Many times Rabbi Mizrachi will speak to a group of people, maybe not so learned, maybe do not attain or possess a lot of knowledge. So deal with that aspect. How do we deal with that aspect, and what are your comments on it?
I call this the Rabbi Nachman Dil Nagon principle. Rabbi Nachman was a brilliant Torah scholar. I'm not a Breslover by any means, but Rabbi Nachman gets a worse rap than Rabbi Mizrachi. People think Rabbi Nachman is jump up and down, wear a white yarmulke, and say nanach all the time. It's not true. They would say that Rabbi Nachman just means go to Uman and da-da-da-da-da. Not true. If you've ever read and learned Likutei Moharan, which happens to be one of the biggest Ger advocates in the last 300 plus years, he has more Geschmack Ger Torah, particularly Torahs 14, 17, and in the Tinyana, chapter 5, parts 4 and 5, where he locates the Ger B'koyach and Ger B'poyel, a convert Ger and a non-Jewish Ger. Rabbi Nachman was a great Torah Talmud Chacham. I've looked it up, the Torahs that he brings and the sources, very Geschmack. Why is he hard to understand? Because he crosses barriers. Rabbi Nachman will take you into Chazal, into Zohar, into Scripture, into many, many areas of wisdom. And if you're not fluid and going to look it up and you think he's making it up, you're going to have a problem with Rabbi Nachman. But he doesn't make it up. And I've been through it and I've checked it out. It is great stuff. Right? He covers so much vast ground. That's why as a Baal Tshuva movement or Kiruv movement, in the name of Rabbi Nachman's Torah, it's tremendously successful. Rabbi Shalom Arush, Rabbi Lazer Brody, all the Israelis that are doing it, and many, many more. At the same time, the Vilna Gaon in Evan Shlema says where people are not experts, seek to become an expert. Mizrachi has done these two things. He crosses boundaries. He's an expert in areas like modesty, which is missing from the repertoire of most Kiruv rabbis. He's made himself an expert. And he is probably the expert out there. In terms of sneas, modesty, Yiddishkeit in this way, he has crossed barriers all over New York, all over the world, whether you're Sephardi, non-Jewish, Jewish, Ashkenazi, Baal Tshuva, FFB, Rabbanim, okay? Whether you like it or not, they're all going to his audience. That's a fact. He's crossing barriers, and he's become an expert. The problem is, even though he's done that, for the people to check his work is very difficult. Because he's crossing the barriers, people don't have access and the freedom of mind to go to all these different schools of thought and camps to check his work. And in the closing thought on this aspect, he's great on giving the emes, but his process in processing each subgroup is a little bit rushed and lo nachon, not exactly churned out. Therefore, it doesn't come across extremely clear. It can be a bit confusing, and that rises room for controversy that's really not necessary in face of the truth that he brings, only in that it creates the question in the sources he brings as they're left largely unexplained to a degree that they should be properly explained.
All right, let's talk about another concept Rabbi Mizrachi spoke about. He spoke about the military in Israel and the non-Jews in general. Give us your thoughts about those comments from Rabbi Mizrachi.
Right. So again, let's try to make sure we keep a consistent thread of what the greater issue is here. All right. That the video was being spread around was like 3 minutes, whatever it was, of out of context and ill-advised delivery. Right. It was from a Lashon Hora group. Afterwards, the entire hour and a half long video was given out. The title of the video was about Zionism. Number one, had nothing to do with the Holocaust. Okay. Now that it's about Zionism, and give me a couple of minutes extra on this, Ari, okay? I want to paint the picture here.
Sure.
For those that want to see the video, you can effectively get the entire message that we're covering from 32 minutes to 42 and a half minutes, okay? Just make the note of that. And one of the things that the group brings up is they start to say, if you're not religious, does God judge you any differently? He says God judges you like an autistic. You're not held accountable because you don't know what Torah demands of you. Now, I don't know if I would use it in that expression, but that's what he said. Then he said, but someone who's religious, they are accountable because they know better. Then they were starting to talk about what happens if you die, this way or that way, when you get to Shemayim, how are you judged? So here's a couple scenarios. I'm going to knock off a couple issues that we talked about in this way, okay? So, on time-wise, let me talk for a minute. He talks about nations conquering nations. When Iraq conquers Kuwait, there's no consequence in terms of Islam. Maybe according to Islam there is, but as a Jewish person in his religion, there's no consequence. It's just a potential Ger nation who's acting Akum, conquering another Akum nation who could have been Ger. As far as we see it, and I'm speaking with Pshuto at this point. When a non-Jewish nation takes out the Jewish people, right, we lose our religion because we no longer have Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos, Mila, all these things. There's consequences. And that's going to be the thrust of our Holocaust debate in about 5 minutes. But at the same time, what happens if a Jewish nation takes out its neighboring nation? It's called Milchamas Reshus or Milchamas Mitzvah, an optional or a mandatory war. And this is where I personally take issue. The Rabbi Mizrachi speaks about it very nicely, and he says that the nations conquered become our servants, and we charge them a levy tax, or a tax. And that is true. Right? If you are an idolatrous nation, and we have a king, and we're going to war, and we want to remove idolatry from the world, we call out to you in peace. Mizrachi says that as well. If they reject the peace, we conquer, and we turn them into this entity. We charge tax. Now, why do I say this entity? Because he left off the cream of the crop, the most important part of the lecture, or of the halacha. You can look in the Ramban, you can look in Rashi, you can look in Rambam. And they all say essentially the same thing. We call out the peace, we take them out, they have tax, and they must accept the 7 laws of Noah. That is halacha. And that was left out of the shir. That's my personal beef. That's and from my field, that's my beef. And Rashi even says something even more special. If you conquered them in the whole deal, and in the 7 laws of Noah aspect, they rise up and say, man, the God of Israel is really right. We want to be Ger Toshav, not from conquering Ger Toshav, as there's many types of Ger Toshav, the kind that you conquer. No. We want to be Ger Toshav, like really a Ger, a Noahide who loves God. God loves the Ger. Rashi says, Lihid Gayer, and you accept them, and it cannot be converted to Judaism according to the Sifsei Chachamim commentary. So we see that when the Jewish people go out, you're either going to be Noahide against their will, at the time we have a king in the Sanhedrin, or God willing, we're a light to nations, Kiddush Hashem, and the nations would quickly realize to become proper God-fearing people, call it Noahide, call it Ger Toshav, whatever you may be. Then from there, the people are discussing what kind of death can you have, in this entity. The warriors of the nation, and our warriors when an Arab, let's say, shoots one of our guys. What happens? And why did they ask that question? Because Rabbi Mizrachi went and quoted as such. He said, at 35 minutes, I forget which number line, he said that those who died in the Holocaust did not die al Kiddush Hashem. They died for being Jews, and he made a distinction that dying Jewish is not the same as dying al Pi Kiddush Hashem. And then the people in the class asked, what about dying for your country, like for Zionism? So here's my paraphrasing of how the class went that he taught. When an American soldier dies in Vietnam, that's not dying Kiddush Hashem, that's just, dying for your country. And he makes a distinction. Dying for your Medina is one type of death that you can die. I'm paraphrasing his ideas. You can die for being Jewish. He says that was the Holocaust deaths. And there's something called dying al Pi Kiddush Hashem, as brought in Sanhedrin 74. I think it's 74a. And then also in Avodah Zarah 27b. Yeah, 74a in Sanhedrin. And in Halacha, Rambam, Yesodei Torah, Perek Hay, halachas 1 through 4, and in Shulchan Aruch Yeridea 157.1. Now I went and did even research on this to make clear how this was not correct, what he said. The idea is that if somebody comes to you, a non-Jew, and says, I'm going to kill you unless you do idolatry, you kill somebody, or, Gilui Arayas. Killing, idolatry, Gilui Arayas. You are supposed to, generally speaking, we say you give up your life and not do the crime. Have you heard about that, Ari Louis?
I have.
All right, so there's many different distinctions in this law. Is it in private? Is it out in the open? What constitutes this? Rabbi Mizrachi said if you literally don't bow down to a statue or are told to bow to a statue, like literally those three things, then it's not Kiddush Hashem, and you're simply dying for being a Jew. That is fundamentally incorrect. Repeat, fundamentally incorrect. And here's why. Now, there are laws about, if it's in private, you don't have to die, or if it's in public, if in front of 10 Jews. Here's where the law was off as he presented it. The Rambam, and he's quoting, the Rambam is bringing you the unified view. There's nobody that argues on this, essentially, in this matter. When there's a shmad, forced apostasy, against Emunat Yisrael, or Dat Yisrael, Jewish religion, not just Jewish people and their schmaltz and herring. If a ruler like Nebuchadnezzar and his friends, and the friends they say is like the Hanukkah revolt, if that comes upon the Jews, that's called shmad. And then all the different halachas go out the window. In terms of, does it have to be in the open you do the crime, or in the public you do the crime, or private you do the crime? If there's a shmad, and they say they are taking away your Judaism, and you die because of it. They kill you. You died al pi Kiddush Hashem. Thus, the Shoah was definitely a shmad. They were not attacking Jews because they happened to be living in Germany. They attacked Jews for being Jewish. Right? When you wore a yellow armband, that was saying that you are a Yid. Has nothing to do with a nationality or even a basic religion. Right? Like in Israel, we're dying for being Jews on the land. That's different. Right? The people they were killing was because the gezeras, the decrees, were such that it was against Dat Yisrael. Dalet Tav. Dat Yisrael. Those that were, how many of you seen a picture of the guy wearing tefillin, spread open, making Kaddish with no shoes and socks over dead people in front of him? You saw that picture, Ari?
I did, yes.
So was that a shmad? Was he being, and that guy was a rabbi. Was he being forced to do this against his God-given Torah religion? Absolutely. That's shmad. Those that died under those conditions died al pi Kiddush Hashem, period. Thus, the number system that we're going to get into in a second, obviously, however many died, it was al pi Kiddush Hashem, period. Then we're going to go on to the last leg of this little journey that I'm on. And in all fairness of Rabbi Mizrachi, he was not being makpid or particular in a number. Right? He's saying there's no such thing as a number. There's not 6 million, there's not 1 million, there's not 3 million, there's not 4, there's not 20 billion. What he's saying is there's an emes. And at the emes, there was an assimilation. And the assimilation brought a catastrophe onto Israel. And in that catastrophe was built up at some point and some time with intermarriages and assimilation. And at some point people died. And out of that death came a movement to move the Jewish people to the land of Israel, where they will build a Zionist country, claiming we have the right to be here because of 6 million deaths. What he is saying is the numbers are incalculable. If you have one Jew who married and had a kid, and the country brought in 20 non-Jews, the chances of that one Jew marrying into non-Jews is a high number. So what he's doing again is the process is a little bit schwach, but he's using not logistical fact, but svara. Know that word, svara. Logical calculation or assumption. Svara. He's saying that of the people that died, how many of them will have a legacy that will remain Jewish? Now, that might be a harsh thing to hear, but we do know that the Jewish people are always in small number, and we are either killed off, married off, or whatever kind of off it is. And it's happening in America, as we said, in Israel with the Russians and all these things. And in Europe, they had their set of pogroms and Holocaust, intermarriage, whatever. He's saying that's the Iker goal that I'm trying to prevent, him speaking of the silent Holocaust. And he says, I'm going to prove it by svara. And now, where people are in conflict with him, they're saying your svara is incorrect as an inaccurate fact. He wasn't trying to present an accurate fact. You can then take cause and say, my friend, even though your end goal, saying there's a silent Holocaust, might be correct, there are people that are drawing conclusions from your logical calculations. You might want to be a little bit more secure in your process, your logical process, because you're using a flawed process to show a truism. It might be best if you either don't show the logic behind it, or get a better logical process to prove your truth that is unassailable. There is a silent Holocaust, but more than 1 million people did die. You'll say that it wasn't about a number, and that's true. There really, as you're saying, al pi drush, not pshat, al pi drush. There is not a number. But people don't understand when it's drush and when it's pshat, and my friend, they are taking you as pshat and not drush. And where I'm taking my personal thing is the actual Torah. I understand the drush, and that wasn't where I was saying I'm coming from. I'm saying in the Torah aspect, it needs to be more nachon. Right? Bring in the law of Noah aspect. Bring in the clarity of what is dying al pi kiddush Hashem, and not get that wrong because it supports the drush. Right? Maybe I'm wrong in saying the drush needs to be cleaner, but that's my opinion. We need to be presenting true Torah for the sake of pshat as much as drush and svara to prove a wow factor of truisms that people need to hear. So it's bittersweet. It comes with a blessing and a curse. I understand that. The criticisms need to be sharper because they're not accurate. And I'm saying at the same time, the logic needs to be accurate for the sake of Torah sanctity.
All right, again, this is the Messiah Hour on Israel Sports News Radio. My guest is Rabbi David Katz. We're talking about the retraction apology of Rabbi Yosef Mizrachi after stating only 1 million Jews died in the Holocaust. Now, Rabbi Katz, Rabbi Mizrachi has stated in the past that the state of Israel was built by Russian communists. I want to know if you agree with that. I want to get your take. Go ahead.
Interesting question. One of the projects that I'm working on this year is translating the Vilna Gaon Zionism into English. Works such as Midrash Shlomo and Kol Torah written by the students of the Ger, which document the early Ashkenazi settlements in Israel that Rabbi Mizrachi mentions in the 19th century, led by the students of the Ger, Baal Tanya, Baal Shem Tov, and eventually the students of Rabbi Nachman Breslev. And what happened is that in my personal research, there's something that we call front side and back side Zionism. And what I think largely what Rabbi Mizrachi is fighting is three things in the world. A lack of modesty, and he's fighting that with a chumrah of how to be modest, and it is a chumrah. Maybe it's necessary, but it's a chumrah. He's fighting also the Erev Rav, Zionist model and secularism. And this is what he comes out strong against, right? And what I call that in my world is backside Zionism, right? It's where the Vilna Gaon Zionism got hijacked by Herzelism, okay? And then eventually the secular and the frum got together in the land. Maybe you can say Rav Kook allowed that or caused that, and we more or less live in harmony today. Those that are Chiloni, those that are from, and we are able to live in this country religiously, by the statutes that have been erected, and those that want to be secular are. It's not ideal. We need a Messiah. Was the Satmar Rebbe right about not being here? Doesn't matter. It happened. We're here. Again, so the Vilna Gaon in his writings and in his ideology about the Erev Rav speaks about what the other side is doing. So in Zionism, there's a front side and a back side. Again, Rabbi Mizrachi talks about it in his own way, and he came to the conclusion that for whatever it's worth, Russia was a major problem, which I find extremely interesting because we found the same in our research. Totally different worlds. I'm coming at it from a Vilna Gaon perspective. He's coming at it just from a light academic knowledge point of view of the kibbutzim and the communism. But we found that the funding of the original Zionism, when the Lubavitchers and the Gronics were coming over, and the government established in Vilna and in Shklov of that time, the funding is always coming backside through Russia and through agricultural Russia, and the Rothschilds and Rockefellers worked through Russia. And this is documented. It's known. And we can see, where did everything go batty with the Yishuv in the 20th century when Russia, called out England's promise to either give it to the Jews or the Arabs, the land of Israel. Russia's the one that caused the machlokas. So Russia is always coming in here, causing fights, arming both sides, and the money is always laundered through the Russians. So it's just interesting that, for all that Israel's great and bad or this or that, I would say a large part of our Yetzer Hara is coming from the establishment of Russia.
All right, let's talk about the smicha test because, Rabbi Mizrachi is a kiruv rabbi, so that kind of makes his talks a little bit different than someone who's not a kiruv rabbi. So if you can talk about that and how it makes things a little bit different than your typical speech.
So we covered this in the last show, and a lot of people were interested by it. It's also an interesting topic for me. I just want to share a personal story that I think will shed a lot of light on what this is. And pointing fingers and drawing conclusions that are negative is really ill-advised, right? It's like saying, who's a better baseball player, Roger Clemens or Mark McGwire? It's a ridiculous question. Well, it's a ridiculous question. One's a pitcher, one's a home run hitter. You can't compare on the same level, right? Or you want to say, who's better, the star first baseman or the utility guy, or the basketball the sixth man? They're essential, absolutely, but they're different roles altogether. So the story goes like this: I was in Kollel and I got smicha. And I was a feisty little guy. Anyone that knows me knows I like to, roll my sleeves up in Torah. And I got smicha from Rabbi Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg. And it was just before Chag Sukkos. And they wanted everyone to mail their tests into his kollel, and the Vrechim will grade the tests. I didn't want that. And I write like a doctor, just totally chicken scratch, and I figured they wouldn't be able to read it. And, to find somebody that I could dictate this to type it up would be a nightmare. So I really clawed and scratched my way to call him. And I said, look, I really need to give this to you in person. And he said, all right, Ken Zion, come to my house. So I went down and I went there and I really enjoyed the smicha test. So I told him that I really enjoyed this one question about the Rambam. And, it was this and it was that. And he says, what do you mean? I said my point of view, and he started arguing with me. So I had to argue back, right, and tell him I thought he was wrong. And we had this debate. Funny enough, before the story continues, I did prove this Rambam 5 years later with my chavrusa Ira Michelson. And we called poskim and asked. So it was just, I don't let it go. But it was interesting because he was looking at me. This guy, he's thinking, is either a total idiot or he's got a point. And he says, let's see if this guy really knows what he's doing. He pulls a Masechta Shabbos off his bookshelf. He makes me learn a Tosfos on the spot to give a psak halacha from Mashma from Tosfos right as he's grilling me. It was not fun. Not fun at all. In the end, I did do it, and I got the smicha, and it was really satisfying. I pulled it off. in the most crazy way. And he looked at me, and he said like this. He said, your test is garbage. Everybody that gives me these tests is garbage. All you guys are giving me all your svaras and pilpuls. Right? You know, it's a question like on the test. Like, a guy goes out to the Rosh Hashanah, and it's on Shabbos, and he had a rock in his pocket from Thursday. The Eruv is a Suffolk Eruv. There's no Makom Patur within Daled Almas. Can he continue walking? What should he do according to the Rush? What should he do according to the Rambam? And is this a case of Muksa? You know what I mean? It's like, whoa! You gotta break it down. So, me, like most people, we BS'd our way through the test because it's called Svara. You're like, well, it could be kind of like Rabbi Shimon said, and about Muksa, and Devar She'ino Miskavin, because I didn't really mean to do it. And this is what most poskim will give you when you call them. It's called Svara, a logical answer. And that's what Rabbi Mizrachi is teaching almost exclusively from. Why? Because rabbis today, almost exclusively, all of them teach from Svara. When I was learning in yeshiva the Brisker style, I was mechanic, they taught me, look, today everyone's learning Svara. It's just where we're at. The lumdis of today, people learn Svara. They're not into mapping out the trail of breadcrumbs from the Psukim, from the Talmud, from the Shittas, from the Rishon. No one's doing it. People don't have a head for it. They want to hear a geschmack, juicy, pill-pull Svara. And that's what Rabbi Mizrachi is doing with the numbers, 1 million, 2 million. He's giving you a Svara. I'm going to express that Svara in a second. Let me just finish my story. So he says, all the tests I get, he said, were all just Svara. Guys making stuff up. And that doesn't mean you're not a rabbi. It just means you're a young rabbi. And he looked at me and he said, look, if you're going to be a rabbi, you need to be able to find out where it's written every single time. Document where it's written. Find the source. If there's a question, whether in law or Metzias, in anything, it exists in the Torah, and it's your duty to find it. And he did it for me on the spot. And for the rest of my life, I'll never forget that. This guy, he was like 80-some years old back then even. This is what a rabbi is. So today I don't believe in giving Svara answers because the master himself taught me this is not what you do. Now, I don't want to be one of those guys who just says, making stuff up on the test to sound like, Rabbi Mizrachi makes fun of people that do the thumbs in the yeshiva, like, if we're gonna go down, and then the yeshiva guys toss their thumbs. I didn't want to be one of those guys anymore. Because it's not nachon. It's not it. But at the same time, today, most people are not this kind of rabbi, of yeshivish, Talmudic, posek type rabbi. It's just not common. It's not the majority of rabbonim. Most rabbis are in kiruv, outreach, these kinds of venues. What's the difference? The difference is, if I'm going to learn something for Ger, I'm going to give you every breadcrumb trail, and it won't sound logical to the uninitiated. It's like, pill-pull jargon of, like Rashi says in Daf Lamed Vav, that if we go to the Shita of Rambam, it's not the same as the Shita of the Rosh. But the Kiruv rabbi, he's different. He's able to look at the picture, go to the shir with his rabbi, and chop. He gets it. He gets it very deep, very quick. And where I would then sit in my office learning it all day long, he's going to go and give 20 lectures. So it's clear in his mind the maskana, the result, the emes that comes at the end. But he's not putting the effort into mapping out the trail of breadcrumbs that you can easily research every step. He's saying, look, the conclusion's right. I know where I got it from. I got it from the Talmud. The Talmud's right. Torah's right. Prove me wrong. But then he explains it from Svara. And that's where it's not exactly according to the steps and methodologies as it was brought from the Talmud, from the Tanakh to the Poskim. And he's saying that's not the Iker. The Iker is there's a silent Holocaust. There's assimilation. You need to be modest. You need to be with the modesty and the tznius, all these things. You need to be frum. You need to keep Shabbos. It says if you don't keep Shabbos, this, and this. So he's not giving over the process clearly
from a Torah perspective, but clearly from an understood perspective. But then there are those that are offended from that perspective. So, that on my side of the world, people are not offended so much. They're just saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Why? Because I give the Torah methodology instead of giving it from Sfara. All I'm saying is you see a model of two very different rabbis, and they both have their pluses and minuses. If you're going to attack him and what he's doing, at least get it right. I'm not saying I'm permitted to attack. I'm saying I don't agree with the Torah methodology. Maybe I'm wrong as well. But don't give a spliced video and an attack based on a methodology where he's not trying to be makbid on how it works. He's trying to give a logical argument. So when the apology came, it wasn't actually accurate. They were being specific in the attack. He was apologizing on that when, in fact, he wasn't being specific. He was giving a logical angle. And to call it illogical is an illogical attack, right? Because he wasn't trying to be literal. That's the point. And I can express the logic in a very simple Talmudic thing. Ari, I think you'll appreciate this. There's a guy in the Talmud with a 5 shekel coin, and you're supposed to bring your produce to Jerusalem on the Chagim, right? And you, instead of bringing your produce because it's heavy, you can transfer the kedusha onto a coin. You understand this?
Yeah, I've heard this.
So the 5 shekels worth of groceries you now have on a coin. You're going from Sfat to Jerusalem, and you have a radio, because back in Talmud they had a radio, right? And you heard there's bandits on the way, about 2 miles away from you. You're probably pretty afraid, aren't you, Ari Louis?
Well, I'm afraid of nothing, but most people would be afraid. Yeah.
So you're afraid, and you're going to say, oh, man, I'm like halfway between Sfat and Jerusalem. I'm not going to get robbed. So you're pretty with it, and you know that there's a merchant about a mile away. And so you go out of your way a mile, and you go to the merchant. Why do you go to the merchant? He says, I have money transferring abilities, right? Give me the 5. I will wire it to Jerusalem. It'll be waiting for you there. So you have no money on you. You're safe. But I'm going to charge you 2 shekels fee. So when you get to Jerusalem, you have 3 shekels. Because if you don't use me, you have 5. But if you get robbed, you have nothing. So therefore, isn't it safe to say since you chose to be safe, you now have a 3 shekel coin? Do you understand that logic?
Yes, that makes sense.
So then he goes to Jerusalem, gets his 3 shekels, and he never got robbed. That is logic. Because otherwise, is it literal? Did he really lose 2 shekels? No. But it's how Svara works. That's how Talmudic logic works. So Mizrachi's not saying X amount of people died. Right? The guy with the coin is not saying you owe me 2 shekels. Because you don't. He's saying, look at the statistics. You got intermarriage happening, you got pogroms happening, da-da-dee-da-da-da. The end result, we already know. Jews are assimilated. Jews are lost. There's a silent Holocaust. Bottom line is, bunch of balagan equals loss of Jews. And then, for the sake of discussion, he gives examples of logical balagan. I'm not talking logic as in A plus B or 1 plus 2 equals, blah, 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 blah. That's not the logic we're talking about. He's just it's called tohu. He's giving like, hey, look at this, we got assimilation. Look at this, in 3 generations, they're going to be lost. Hey, look at the Russians in Israel. They're marrying Israelis and no one's doing anything about it. Hey, look at America. He's telling you, look at the big picture. Jews are lost. Let's stop losing Jews. Let's start to keep the Torah. Then there'll be no more silent Holocaust. Then everyone's happy and Mashiach comes. And again, where I step in is to say, okay, great, you're using logic, but if you're going to blend Torah into the logic, like the Holocaust dying Kiddush Hashem, please explain the Kiddush Hashem correctly. When a Jewish nation makes a war, please explain it correctly that the nations then would have to take on the 7 laws and don't conveniently leave it out. Right? So, and why does it happen? Because he's speaking of a very vast area, and people lack the knowledge to either check him out on it, or if they don't just accept it, then they challenge it out of the darkness. So none of it's really right in terms of anyone's behavior. The only thing that we can do is understand where he's coming from It's a good place. He's giving you the emes at the end. I mean, you can't say that there's not the silent Holocaust going on. There is. But what we can say is try to understand people are watching your process. Right? And if we're going to learn, I'm taking this much for myself too. If we're going to learn from the process, then we have to clean up our logic and clean up the Torah that we use. And when we make a hybrid together, it just has to be a little bit cleaner. And that's what will take away people's complaints and animosity and taking things out of context.
All right, again, this is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest is Rabbi David Katz, co-author of the book, The World of The Ger. Last question for you, Rabbi. Let's talk polygamy. What are your thoughts on it?
Polygamy is one of those things that it's, they say that in the end of days, the pig is going to return to chew its cud. You ever hear about that?
Sure, yeah, that's what
Yeah, so then they say, well, hey, I can't wait to have my ham and cheese sandwich. Well, just because it becomes kosher, does that mean then you have to eat pig? You see what I'm saying? Just because it's kosher doesn't mean you have to eat it. McDonald's is kosher. Does that mean I have to run out and have a nasty, not cheeseburger, but, a Big Mac? There's no chiyuv to do it. The Torah says if you steal, you get to give back the stolen item. Should I steal to do it? So, people always talk about polygamy. If it's the Torah law and Rabbeinu Gersh took on us Rabbeinu Gershom, I can't wait to have my many wives. Why? The Torah allows it under certain conditions. Fix the Yetzer Hara. If you have a Yetzer Hara for that, it doesn't mean it's optimal to go and do it. Right? A lot of things. There's a famous Ramban in the Chumash. That which Hashem used to love, now he hates, and what he hates, he used to love. Now, we can obviously turn that to a great perversion, New Testament, Old Testament, but that's not what the Ramban is saying. He's saying when Yaakov had two sisters as wives. Okay, it was before Matan Torah, Yaakov had to do it. You can say God was maskim. God allowed it to happen. It doesn't mean today we should say, hey, let's be like Yaakov. Right, Yaakov kissed Rachel at the well. Hey, Yaakov did it. Let's do it. You're not Yaakov. And it's a different time. That which was love then, don't do now. So when the Torah speaks about all these weird cases that come up and these weird discussions, and that's what Rabbi Mizrachi represents. And how do I know that? Because I teach the same way. I bring up weird things like Para Aduma and the Ger and the Yafat Toar mitzvah and the laws of Noah and all their eccentric ways, right? So we attract a very diverse crowd. And one of the questions is, hey, when do I get my 5 wives? The answer is you don't. And get your head out of the gutter for thinking so. Right? The Torah warns us, back in the day, Ger and Jew married. The Yafat Toar mitzvah. You go to the captive, woman of war, she grows her fingernails. All right, it had its purpose in creating Klal Yisrael. But in the future, the tikkun will be, there will be Gerim and there will be Jews, and there's no need to intermarry. So Rabbi Mizrachi is fighting intermarriage on one hand, and I applaud that. I'm saying there's in an ideal world there won't be intermarriage. There's going to be no need for a Jew and a Ger to marry, like back in the day, in the earliest of times. For example, the tribe of Judah was particular to do it. It's very hard to do. If you didn't do it right, you created a Sover Amora child, a wayward child. The Torah is going to refine people, and also about the polygamy is like eating meat. The Torah says fill your taiva with meat. People get this wrong as well. It does. And first of all, what does it mean fill your taiva? It doesn't mean like, I can eat 1 billion hamburgers. It doesn't mean that. It just means whatever you like to eat, go ahead and eat it, but don't go out of your way to increase your taiva. That's why marijuana is illegal. It increases your taiva unnaturally. But as for the eating meat, what Rav Kook was saying, and all these ideas, the base of meat dish is not called eating meat. Karbonos is a different deal. So if there's going to be a time where we don't eat meat, it means outside of holy kodshim meat of the temple. Because outside of the temple, there's really no absolute need. Maybe you can make a case for Yontiv, but that's already a shtickle holy food. So all these things like polygamy and meat and paraduma and I call this Ger Torah. It's eccentric Torah, and it covers. It's such a vast topic. I'm kind of like the anti-Rabbi Mizrachi, not in a negative way, but, like, yin and yang, two sides of the same coin. I teach very vast also. Non-Jews keeping the non-Jewish Shabbat. People hear that and they say, oh, you say a non-Jew can keep a Jewish Shabbat. You didn't hear what I said. Non-Jewish Shabbat. Creases 9a. Right? Very weird abstract Torah. Where the difference is, I'll close on this, where let's say I have my plus is that I map it out in Torah sources, where there's a negative on me is if you're not exactly clear what I'm saying, you will probably speak Lashon Hara about me, get the Torah wrong, and then it's going to be a little tiff where I have to come back and make a video and document my sources, which cleans me up and makes me a little bit more responsible in my process, and we further the trend. But, it's just a very difficult field because it's very fine in its details. Rabbi Mizrachi is really doing the same thing. He's saying, assimilation's a problem, this is a problem. The only difference is he's doing it from Svara. He's giving you the end result. And in his process, where people are confused by me just by the jargon, they are offended by what he says, and it's because they're not really listening or they're getting the sources skewed from these anti-Mizrachi hate groups, and that's not fair either. So in all fairness, if you're going to take someone to task, get the original source, the original video. If it's in Hebrew, then I'm sorry. You have to listen to it, get it translated. You need to do the work, because the video that we're talking about was in Hebrew. I sat for an hour and a half, rewinding many parts, getting it right in the Hebrew. If you're going to take someone to task, do it right without Lashon Hara and in the essence of the thing itself without being offended, but, go to task on, this is false or this is that. Understand styles. If it's Svara, don't call it Pshat. Now, the giver of the drush should make clear this is a drush, this is not Pshat. But we're all not perfect, we're all imperfect, we're all human. At the end of the day, he has problems that comes with a Kiruv rabbi. I have problems that come with the kind of rabbi that I am, called a Talmudist. And he and I are going to step on each other's toes, whether it's him or somebody else. It's a natural thing. And the best we can do is work on ourselves, learn how to dance. I'm glad I got to see the video. I see where he's coming from. And all I can say from my heart is if you're not Jewish and you're listening to his material, understand who he is, where he's coming from, and understand who I am, where I'm coming from, whether it be Laser Brody, Avram Greenbaum, all these different people in the fringe world of the Ger, non-Jewish, Baal Tshuva, the Rebbe Nachman world, really, and understand where we're coming from, who we are, why we're a little weird sometimes, and how it comes across. Try to not be offended. Try to conquer your passions. Try to get your mind wrapped around it. Go to the original source. Reach out. Contact the person. Have it out like mature adults, and I'm sure you'll find a happy ground. Because I have perfect faith now that if I were to talk to Rabbi Mizrachi, I'd at least come in prepared knowing what I'm talking about, instead of following some trashy video by a trashy group. At the end of the day, will people make mistakes on his work, my work, and other people's works? Yeah. Should we rise up and be offended because of that? No. It's just the way it works. Maisa Satan exists in the world. Our job is to find Achdus Ahavas Yisrael, rise above it, and understand there are challenges in this world, and God willing, Mashiach will come. We'll rise above our challenges, and the glory of God will be manifest in the whole world, and the knowledge of God will prevail.
All right, well said. This has been another episode of the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest has been Rabbi David Katz. You can find his work on both of his websites, ger.com and SoulMazal.com. Rabbi, thank you for being on the program. Great job as always.
Thanks for having me back, Ari. Pleasure.
Yes, indeed. And anyone out there listening, if you want to contact me, email messiahhour@gmail.com, or you can email the station Israel Sports and News Radio gmail.com. If you like what you heard and you want to give a donation, you can do so through PayPal, israelsportsradio@yahoo.com. The PayPal is different than the website, so I'll say it one more time, israelsportsradio@yahoo.com. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Be well, stay safe, God bless, and shalom.